Here at the Canadian Club, we have always been a forum for public figures, thought leaders, and decision makers to share their ideas and inform the most relevant and compelling conversations of our time.
We are dedicated to encouraging debate on the issues that matter to this city, this province, and this country.
The Canadian Club is one of the most important podiums anywhere in the world that a Canadian can speak to, tell Canadians what it is that they think, develop those thoughts. And so I want to thank you for that very, very much.
Please join me in thanking our esteemed panelists today.
Through our programs and events, including our youth and young leaders programs, our diversity partnerships, our joint events, and our media and social media opportunities, we offer you access to dynamic political, social, and business figures from abroad and right here at home.
The platform from which the eloquence of Canada has flowed all of that time, whether it be business, education, politics, sports, arts, and culture. If someone wants to say something to Canadians about this country and about the future of this country, this is the venue you choose.
All right, I've been given the cue. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Andrea Mandel-Campbell, and I'm your host, and great to see you all here today. I am grateful to those of you who are joining us online as well, and I want to thank our AV services, Van Valkenburg Communications and livemeeting.ca. We really appreciate your participation. I would also like to thank Tories, represented here by my fellow member on the board, Kanata Lake, for their generous sponsorship of this event. Thank you. Applause. I'd also like to thank Canada's Forest Trust and ESG company Planting Smart Forests to take action on climate change. Our partnership is reducing the carbon footprint of our entire season of events. Thank you also to our season sponsor, Canadian Bankers Association, for its support. I would like to also welcome the young leaders in the room for joining us today, including Civic Action Diversity Fellows, Pitch Better, and Toronto Metropolitan University. Welcome. We're really glad to see you here today. And I just ask everybody, there are, I think, little tabs on the table. If you have questions that you want to ask our panelists, please fill them out and we'll make sure we get them to our moderator here today. For those that are joining us online, click Activity tab on the right-hand side of the video player and you'll find the question button there. We'll make sure to get that to our moderator as well. Okay, so now I'm happy to introduce our panel. I'm going to start with Lisa Melchior, Managing Partner and Founder, Vertu Capital. Lisa is an experienced private equity professional with more than 20 years of experience building businesses and successful investment outcomes. Prior to founding Vertu, she led the North American technology group at OMERS Private Equity. And over the course of her career, Lisa has invested nearly $1.4 billion in over 20 companies. Eva Wong is co-founder and chief operating officer of Borrowell. Eva is I said that already. Borrowell is a financial technology company dedicated to making financial prosperity possible for everyone. With over 2 million members, Borrowell is one of the largest consumer fintech companies in Canada. Eva is an EY Entrepreneur of the Year winner in Ontario. It was named one of the Standout 35 on the Global Women in Fintech Power List. Rhiannon Davies is co-founder. I told you we had a really good panel. Rhiannon Davies is co-founder and managing partner at Sandpiper Ventures. Rhiannon's background is in turnaround and scaling businesses in specialized nutrition, medical device, and consumer space. A decade ago, she became COO of Grand Vision, a PE-backed eye care company that began as a group of acquisitions across 25 markets. Rhiannon became CEO, later helped take Grand Vision public on the Amsterdam Stock Exchange, raising $1.5 billion. And moderating our discussion today is April Fong. She is executive editor of The Logic. She joined The Logic from BNN, Bloomberg, where she oversaw the editorial content of its digital platforms. Prior to that, she worked as a digital producer at the Financial Post. She also spent 4 years in Shanghai as editor for China Economic Review and Talk magazine. April, panelists, the Canadian Club podium is now yours.
Thank you so much, Andrea, and I want to thank the Canadian Club for hosting us today, and thank you to you three for joining us today, and for everyone for braving the snow to come in for this event. I think we're going to have a really important conversation today. In my time as a business journalist, I haven't seen the headlines and, quite frankly, the pain that companies, tech companies, leaders, employees are all going through at the moment. So much of the industry is having to make hard decisions, and what I'm hoping we can do today with thoughtful leaders like Lisa, Eva, and Rhiannon is have some real talk on how to navigate through this volatile and truly uncertain period ahead. So, like Andrea said, bring in your questions. We'd love to hear from you. Don't be shy. Let's dive right in. Let's get a lay of the land. I thought we could start off our conversation on what we're seeing on the ground, what you're seeing on the ground, how the macro uncertainty and the downturn is affecting Canadian tech. Lisa, in your opinion, how bad are things really? What are you hearing? What are some of the concerns you're hearing from your portfolio companies?
Yeah, no, thanks, April. Like, to frame the answer, we invest in enterprise businesses, tech businesses, B2B businesses, so we do not invest in consumer tech. But in the world of enterprise or business technology, there's a tremendous amount of uncertainty. I think that's the key word that I would use and frame the discussion. The macroeconomic levers that have been pulled are still working their way through the system. Most of our portfolio companies and the companies that we look at are struggling to have a clear sense for what the near-term future is looking like. And so forecasting, 12 to 24 months out is very difficult relative to what it would have been like, pre-correction. So that's the key, I think, the key message that I'd send is that there's a lot of uncertainty, and therefore the reaction is usually to be a little bit more cautious, be a little more conservative in terms of what you expect your sales forecast to look like, layering on top that everybody's trying to manage their cash and they bring down their spend. I mean, if it's obviously a knock-on effect, if you think your revenues you're planning conservatively for revenue, you would plan even more conservatively for spend. And so that has obviously a trickle-down effect in terms of the growth in the economy overall.
Rhiannon, what are your thoughts on this? What's the runway that companies are having to build for right now?
Companies are really, I will feel comfortable with a 2-year runway, and maybe that won't be enough. None of us have a crystal ball, but extending cash flow and extending runway, of course, is very important, but also I have a very rose-colored veneer on my crystal ball. So I'll and it is a crystal ball, but I see this as a moment where, yes, we need to kind of put up our shields and follow cash flow, but we also need to be open for opportunities, because this is the time when opportunities are going to bustle out. So don't just look at your navel and protect what you have. That's the terrible danger in a market like this. Be the one. Have the strength and the innovative vision to say, I'm going to take action. I'm going to actually be the entrepreneur who stands out. And investors will be looking for that. And we need to, as investors, also be looking for those innovators who are daring enough to put a hand up and say, yes, I'm taking care of my company, but I'm also doing that with an eye for growth. So don't get rid of the growth as we double down on what we need.
A rose-colored veneer, I like that. Eva, what kind of veneer are you looking through? What's a top concern for Borrowell, and how has Borrowell had to adjust its strategy?
Yeah, I really love what Rhiannon was sharing, because I do think that there's so many. You guys can probably have like a little bingo chart where like I don't have a crystal ball comes up, and don't waste a good crisis. I'll probably add to that. But I do think there's a ton of opportunity that comes out of these moments. And I think as Andrea was sharing, yeah, we're not where we were 2 years ago, but that means there are lots of new and different opportunities, both for companies that exist like Borrowell. And one of the things, I mean, one of the trends that we've been following is just the increasing housing affordability crisis that exists, which means more people are renting now and renting for longer, and that trend seems like it's going to continue. So we looked to see what are some of the needs that renters have, and we launched a new product last year that enables renters to be able to report their rent payments to the credit bureaus. And so, you know, there are lots of opportunities that come up if you're looking for them, and the best way to get out of a crisis is to grow out of a crisis. You can definitely focus on the expense side and cut, but it's much more exciting if you can also focus on new revenue opportunities and new product opportunities.
The best tech companies are formed at this time, if you look historically, right? Some of the best, most enduring tech businesses were built during corrections.
And I think a lot of times as an individual, I know there's lots of students in the room, it's that people couldn't get jobs. Their first choice was to go work at a big corporation and no one was hiring, so they decided to start companies. So I'd say it's true, not just at a corporate level, but at an individual level as well.
Seeing the opportunity in the crisis, really interesting. I want to turn our conversation to fundraising and the market environment, which has really had an about face in the last year. Lisa, valuations aren't what they once were, and we're hearing about investors writing down the companies that they've backed. Is this a fundamental reshift in the way that we're looking at tech firms' valuations?
I would say it's a classic correction. So, you know, I've invested through 3 corrections now, and none are exactly the same, but the patterns are similar. This particular correction, though, is following 10 years of a bull run, then amplified with 2 years of excess stimulus through the corrections. So there's just a lot more air that needs to be taken out of the system. The valuation environment 2 years ago was, not, in many cases, not logical, right? There was really no fundamental basis for some of the valuation statistics that you would have seen in the paper. We're fundamentals-based investors, and so to me, this is really healthy. To be honest, the correction is healthy. It's bringing us back to fundamental valuation calculations and bringing the whole world back with us, because it's kind of hard to be the fundamental valuation investor when people are throwing around your competitors maybe throwing around investments at 5x what you think it's worth. So I think it's healthy, but I do think it's going to take time to fully play through. So we're somewhere in the thick of the correction. It's going to take several quarters still, I think, to fully play through.
Rhiannon, we're seeing valuations come down, but we're also seeing some major industrial policy shifts towards EVs, clean tech, quantum, and AI, a competition between governments like China, the US, and Canada, of course. What do you make of this? Is industrial policy a way to fill in the gap if private fundraising is slowing?
I think industrial policy can go a very, very long way. And particularly now, the world is in such a state where we need innovative solutions. We need innovative solutions to get us out of a healthcare crisis, a housing crisis, a labor crisis that continues even with all the tech layoffs, and a climate crisis that is breathing down our neck with a heat that is painful. So yes, policy can play an enormous role in that, in that it encourages growth and support of what we're building, but it cannot do it alone. The private sector still needs to take its responsibility and continue to put capital into these companies, because the growth is not going to be driven by policy alone. So it really is the time for us all to come together, the innovators, the existing industries, and government policymakers, and say, collectively, this is a moment of opportunity. Let's embrace that, recognize that, and work together to move ahead. This is not something that we can plug with a policy Band-Aid, I'm afraid.
Absolutely. Over lunch, we actually spoke a little bit about innovation policy in this country and innovation spending. And you asked me, does the logic cover innovation spending? Oh, do we ever? And I asked you the question right back, Lisa. What do you want to see? What's on your wish list for innovation spending policy in 2023?
Yeah, I just also want to start by saying how important the innovation economy is to all of us as Canadians. We've done some work at Vertu around this, and it's really just pulling apart the Stats Can data. If you look back 5 years, the contribution of tech to GDP is about 4 times the rest of all the other subsectors of the economy in Canada in terms of contribution to growth. So, what's good for GDP growth is more tech in our economy. And how we do that, it's not one silver bullet, for sure. I agree with Rhiannon. It's an ecosystem effect. It's an ecosystem of investors, of policymakers, of entrepreneurs, of educators, reporters, continuing the conversation, continuing to put a spotlight on our innovation economy, and experiment with things. I said this at lunch. I love Canada for a lot of reasons. And the one thing I wish we did better was embrace risk. And entrepreneurialism and building great tech companies is all about backing those individuals who have taken great risk in starting their business. And sometimes when you take great risk, things don't work out. And that's okay. And I think as a country, we've got to be okay with that too. So experiment with different solutions. One of which we talked about, is government procurement. That's just one, that's a little pet peeve of mine, that we find Canadian tech businesses have an easier time selling their technology solutions to foreign governments, particularly U.S. government entities, easier than selling to our own governments, which is a shame, and I think something we should try and correct.
I think we could probably have a whole session on the ArriveCan app, right?
Yes.
Eva, how is Borrowell looking at the market right now? Is Borrowell looking to fundraise? What would your advice be to other founders or startup leaders who might be looking to raise some money?
Yeah, I mean, maybe I'll echo some of what Lisa was sharing before. For sure, valuations have come down, but I do think there has been a return to fundamentals, right? Yeah. Ensuring that you actually have good unit economics. You're not just completely focused on top-line revenue growth. And so I think, we share a similar sentiment. It's great that some of these fundamentals are actually being valued, because I think before, some of your competitors were funding these companies that didn't necessarily have a solid business model underpinning, great marketing and great customer acquisition. So I guess that is, there is that, you need to have a good business and build products that consumers want and are willing to pay for. So, that I think is exciting for us as a company. And yeah, I think it's very hard to provide sort of blanket advice, right? It really does depend on the individual company and sort of the market they're in. I guess I would just come back to, there is lots of opportunity, and so how can we grow out of the situation as opposed to sort of cut back, just focus on sort of reducing spend and expenses.
There's been some really interesting talk about how the uncertainty has spilled over into sour deals and how that can be hurting Canadian tech. Laura Lenz from Omers Ventures, last week she tweeted that she's heard of repricing by investors, final agreements being signed, and then money not being wired, or money's wired and then it's actually pulled back after it's wired. What are you hearing in the industry? Are you hearing the same thing?
I am. I mean, we recently participated in a deal where the lead investor pulled the valuation after all of the documentation was ready, and it was devastating for the founder. So we do see that kind of activity. We also see, and this speaks a lot to the risk approach that Lisa was talking about. We see due diligence processes that are not about rigor and responsibility, they're become about bureaucracy, and that's killing. It's killing, and that's what's affecting our procurement process. It's what's affecting kind of the bleed of IP that goes down to the US, because if we don't buy our own products, they're going to leave. So we're seeing sort of a reaction to doing what we know, not daring to invest in new things, and that's just not new innovations. It's also investing in underrepresented founders that haven't necessarily seen success before. But it's also this sort of assumption that, you know, if you do more paperwork, you're going to make better decisions, but that's not how you get to a quality decision. So get rid of that fear, keep the rigor in your due diligence, but don't build it into an ugly process.
Lisa, what are your thoughts on this? You know, are the poor market conditions an excuse for bad investor, startup, founder relations?
No.
Never.
They are not. It is not an excuse. And that's short-termism that we've seen in the market before. That kind of behavior just generally catches up with you. And I'm sure it will again. Yeah, no, I don't. Sadly, I'm not surprised, because it's tough out there. I mean, when you talk about fundraising, the question, I'm sure you were coming from the perspective of fundraising the companies, but of course, those funds who are investing also fundraise, and it's all a system. It's a system, right? And everybody's having some fundraising issues right now, but it's never an excuse for that kind of behavior.
Yeah, I agree.
And founders talk too, right? Like, I think there's like the reputation, the reputational effect of,
right.
It isn't just that one founder you're burning, it's the reputation of the firm.
Yeah. And that's so important. And it's also the mentality of the investor. Scrimping and squeezing on valuation in any market is not a growth mentality. Because it's and I think in Canada we tend to have a little bit, and there's a huge generalization of, I want to have a big piece of that pie, instead of I just want to have the biggest pie in the world. So if we think about building these massive pies, then it's not about your starting valuation. It's about making sure that you are creating an environment to build the biggest pies.
Eva, we've seen a pullback by tech firms in Canada on some of their global expansion plans, layoffs, which we'll get to in a moment. Do you think that companies were aiming too high when times were good? They're taking in so much money, and we thought this was a fundamental shift in consumer behavior. Let's double our headcounts, let's go global. And then it turned out maybe to be a blip. What's the lesson from that we should take into 2023?
I mean, maybe the lesson is hindsight's 2020. It's very easy after the fact to realize that you maybe were a bit too ambitious. I mean, I have a lot of empathy and sympathy for founders and leaders, because, your investors are pushing for growth. That's like what you're measured by. And so I think in that war for talent, and you've got like great ideas that you want to fund, and when capital is cheap, it makes sense to be a bit riskier. So. Yeah, again, if we had a crystal ball, could we have predicted it? Maybe. And for those companies that were a bit more prudent, maybe they're thankful that they didn't overhire. But I do think, it's very easy to see the lessons in hindsight.
Rhiannon, every day there seems to be a new big number of layoffs in tech. Yesterday, for example, we saw how Google's massive layoffs, 12,000 layoffs globally, could hit the Canadian AI sector. They decided to shut down its Edmonton office, DeepMind office. DeepMind is, of course, Google's renowned AI research arm. Yet there are also labor shortages in Canada, and not too long ago we were discussing how there's this fierce war for talent, tech talent. How are these layoffs reconfiguring the hiring picture, in your opinion?
I think we'll see more care in hiring, because and also, I mean, I think we've probably all seen it, but the alarm about, wow, all these layoffs. But then if you look at the past 3 years and the speed of hiring, we're actually sort of correcting something that was tenfold greater. So we're actually back at 9/10 of where we were in 2020. So there's significantly more people in the workforce. So it's these layoffs take a little bit of the pressure off, but there's still a labor shortage that is driven by longer-term structural situations, like the fact that the baby boomers are all retiring now, and we can't get people through our academic institutions quickly and effectively enough. So there are structural issues on both ends, both incoming labor force and outgoing, that are going to have longer-term implications on the labor force. And this massive fluctuation that was sort of potentially irresponsible but very rapid and understandable growth that is correcting somewhat it's a short-term reconfiguring and correction, but it's certainly not correcting down to a level that will flood the labor force with incredible talent. It's more of a reshuffling and a reshift.
Eva, how is Borrowell, as COO of Borrowell, how is your company thinking about downsizing and layoffs? Have you had to make hard decisions?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've always been very prudent in terms of like how we grow, and we've wanted to, make sure that our expenses are aligned with our revenue. Our CFO is here, so lots of credit to Jeff for keeping maybe us as founders in check. For us, we're still hiring. I think it's an exciting time. What we've been experiencing is that there are definitely more people applying, but we still are in a situation where, good talent is in demand. And so, today I'm hiring a data scientist, and we've been told, okay, the candidate that we're interested in has another offer and they need an answer by Friday. So there's still, good talent is still in demand. And I'd say that from a salary perspective, we're not seeing salary expectations come down. Maybe they're not increasing the way they have been. It feels like every 6 weeks the salary expectations were going up. They're not going up, but they're not coming down.
A good follow-up question that we have from our audience today, and thank you for the questions that are coming in. Maybe Lisa, you could tackle this one. How can young Canadians, such as new or recent graduates, prepare themselves and be competitive in this time of uncertainty, especially in the tech industry?
Well, as you could probably look up Eva's business and see if you could go if there's a job there. My advice to young people is just go out there and get experience, good experience, learn, be a sponge. There's some fantastic technology companies in this country, and literally from coast to coast. So no matter where you live, there's really cool businesses being built. Those businesses may be growing a little more slowly, but they're still growing. And Eva just mentioned that, there's, for great talent, there are jobs out there. So go get some great experience and try new things. And don't be afraid to take risk.
Take risk. That's a key message today.
Yes.
Eva, how about you? What kind of advice would you give to new upcoming graduates who are interested in innovation and tech?
Yeah, I mean, I think you'll see that we have, I think, a relatively rose-colored lens on opportunities for businesses. I would say the same thing about individuals, right? It's like if you are at a company that's experienced layoffs, that actually is an opportunity for those who are still there, right? There's opportunities for you to take on another role or to take on a new project, and so. I think there's lots maybe you wouldn't have chosen this, but maybe this is the push you need to start your own business. And I'd really encourage you to do that. One of the things I like to say is that if you looked at an early Mark Zuckerberg as he started Facebook, put yourself up against him. I bet that if you were to compare, you probably are way better on a lot of things than Mark Zuckerberg. And if you have any kind of work experience, you're probably, I would probably bet on you rather than on him. So you don't really need any kind of qualification to start a business. And so if you're thinking about it, I really encourage you to go do it.
Rhiannon, Canada's worked so hard to build homegrown tech champions. We've talked over lunch, actually, just a little bit about how, there's this tradition or history of U.S. tech firms coming to buy Canadian startups. In terms of labor and talent, though, with all these layoffs happening, how can we ensure that we don't lose our talent, that the layoffs don't affect the growth of tech talent that we've had in Canada?
We support the great companies that we have in Canada with the capital and the visibility, buy their stuff, and give them the operating cash and the capital to be able to hire the right people. If we build great companies, we will retain people. And one success story has a ripple effect for all of the companies around it. So really supporting great Canadian companies is going to attract people. It'll attract layer on investors. It will attract, it generates wealth. It's a very logical progression.
Something like a Shopify or PayPal Mafia kind of effect, right?
Or a Verifin, or there are a bunch of them. Yeah. We just need more.
Lisa, what are your thoughts on that? How can we make sure that this wave of layoffs doesn't affect the talent that we have in the tech sector in Canada?
Well, again, the theme here is also optimism, because I'm very optimistic about the tech labor market in this country. There's a firm called CBRE that does a tech talent report, and every year Canadian cities seem to become more and more prominent in terms of the growth of tech talent. In Toronto, it broke the top 3 last year, and there are a number of Canadian cities across the country in the top 20. So I'm optimistic about the tech talent hubs that we have created, and I think it's important to acknowledge that those hubs create businesses, right? So we've heard from Rhiannon and Eva about, if you have it's a network effect of tech businesses that spawn off of great success stories, but it's not just it's like the Shopify Mafia, but there's been experience in that community of what it takes to take a company from 0 to 1 million, 1 to 5, and 5 to 10, and so forth. And so there's more of that now than ever. There's more of that in the ecosystem than ever, so I'm very optimistic. I do think Canadian tech companies, as a generalization, tend to be more capital efficient than American tech companies, and therefore, while there have been layoffs, proportionately it's lower than maybe what you'll see in other markets, and so I think that should bode well for our, the employment in our sector, and I also think Canada as a general rule has a great reputation globally of building great technology. So if you plotted quality on a map, Canada ranks very highly, and I think that again is good foundation for our innovation economy.
I might offer a slightly different opinion, which is I don't necessarily think it's bad for Canadians to go to the U.S. and work, whether it's in the U.S. or abroad. I think what's on us is to make this the best place for them to come back to with, having seen scale at a company other than Shopify, right? And so I think maybe a little bit more of that like chutzpah or like risk taking that you're talking about. Maybe you need to like see it a little bit, or immerse yourself in that a bit, and maybe some experience outside the Canadian market is actually helpful.
I think that's so important. I think it's also important to encourage our companies to be selling outside the country, be thinking globally, be setting up satellite offices in other countries as well, and become more global, because global companies will also attract greater talent. And the last thing I would add is this notion that we talk about a lot, and Lisa, you and I have talked about this, is of being a high-growth technology company, but also a high-growth technology company with a purpose. Because people today are looking for companies that are delivering phenomenal growth and profitability, and consumers are as well, and customers are as well, but also companies that have a purpose to them. They're solving a problem, that are innovating in a constructive way, and I think that is a phenomenal thing for attention as well.
And maybe when we're surrounded by so many problems and uncertainty, the solutions are that much more succinct, right? I'm going to take another question from the audience, and this one maybe Eva can start us off. How are you and the industry, so I guess Borrowell and the tech industry, preparing for more and more cybersecurity threats or attacks? How are you training your staff, or are you implementing additional measures?
Yeah, for sure. I think especially as a financial technology company, it's something that's always been front of mind. For us, the way that we think about it is that we don't just have a security team of like one or two, really like everyone is on the security team. And our head of security will say that it really is like a culture that you have to build, because it's very easy. You can't rely just on sort of like technology solutions in order to make sure that the data that you have is secure. So that's been a big focus for us, is like, how do we build that culture into everybody? How, from the very first day that you join Borrowell through your onboarding to, the ongoing sort of phishing campaigns that we get. I feel like now the simulated phishing is like so good. It's like way better than real phishing. So yeah, it's definitely top of mind. And I do think that in a scenario now where people are feeling like more desperate, there's just like more, there's more cybersecurity risk out there. So we're seeing that for sure, is that this is a trend that's going to continue to increase. It's not something that is waning at all.
Build it into your culture.
Yeah.
I want to turn to leading in this time. You are all three of you are leaders in the tech industry. What is the opportunity here, Lisa? What are your thoughts on leading in times of great change?
So where, this is another bingo card. Where there's change, there's opportunity to do things a little differently. And keying off something Rhiannon was just saying, how do you take all of this flux in the economy, in the way we work, in our demographics, and so on, and come up with a solution, and how do you build a business that's different and differentiated, as an example, and meaningful, because I do think that the world is going that way. That is the direction of travel. I think that people will gravitate to firms, to brands that, that have purpose, and that includes investment firms, frankly. So as an example, and we talk a lot about, how the future of work and how we're all going to work, and these sort of artificial constructs. Why for the last 100 years, we don't live in an agricultural society anymore. Why were we all working exactly between the hours of 9 to 5? Not that everyone in this room was working between 9 to 5. But why was that the structure, right? And can now that that's been broken because of the pandemic and the world of opportunity opens up, what is right for one business may not be right for another, and that's okay. This is a great opportunity for creativity in terms of leadership. How to do things a little bit differently, and innovation, frankly, in leadership. So I'm excited about that.
Last week, New Zealand's Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern made headlines because she said I think the words are, she had no longer had enough in the tank to lead the country, which really brought forward this discussion about burnout, especially among women who have had to manage a little bit more during the pandemic with home and work life. How should business and tech leaders be thinking about this when they're managing their teams, managing all the pressures that are coming from this market uncertainty? What can we be doing better to retain and take better care, perhaps, of our staff? Let's start with you, Eva.
Yeah, I really think that, and I'm not saying this is easy, but I think really focusing on the long term, like what is good for your team long term is good for your business long term. In the long term, it is not good for your, and you may be like, okay, if people can just work harder this week and ship more code, it'll be better, which I think is true, so to the Borrowell team. But long term, it is long term, that's not good for people to burn out, right? We so value the people on our team who've been around for a long time. There's so much historical knowledge. So having great people who will stay with your company is good for your business. And so I really think that we just have to be a little bit more long-term focused and not quite as short-term focused. Build a great place to work that will attract great people who care about your mission, will put in the extra hours because they care about our customers. Like all that has been super important. I think really important to Borrowell's success.
Lisa, you've been pretty outspoken that in this time of poor market conditions, economic conditions, we're forced to lead with discipline. And this is when great companies will emerge. What's your thinking around that? Why is the downturn the right time to build Canada's next Shopify?
Because thank you for that question. It forces you to really focus on the fundamentals and on what Eva just said on the long term. You know, when there's a frenzy in the market and there's a lot of momentum driving you, it's easy to get caught up in it and frankly, more tough to step back, reflect, and focus on the long term and make maybe some tougher decisions that are good for the long term. And now in this period of correction where you know, you have some air cover to make some of those changes that may be better for the long term. Maybe look at your organization. Is this a good time to think about you know, organizing for the next chapter of your journey? Is there talent? Are there talent gaps in your business? There's more talent available now than there was a year or two ago. And then we talked about thinking creatively about the future. How about, you know, leading out of this correction with strength? For all of those reasons, I think the best tech companies get formed can be formed in and around this time, and so, you know, that's sort of the collection of explanations, and that's frankly what we're looking for in the companies that we invest in.
We've got a few minutes left, so I wanted to end with a rapid fire round. And you're going to look into your crystal balls.
Okay.
I think we've hit that on the bingo card a couple times now. But in 30 seconds or less, I'm going to go to each of you and ask you what tech industries or areas can Canada lead in 2023? What's the one to watch? Rhiannon?
Digital health.
That's it. And why?
Digital health and climate. Oh, I have 30 seconds. I thought you wanted a rapid fire. Okay.
Why is it the one to watch?
Healthcare in general. I mean, our healthcare system is broken. The U.S. healthcare system is broken. The UK. I mean, many healthcare systems around the world, for a variety of different reasons, are broken. And our economic survival and our human survival is dependent upon being able to provide the right level of healthcare. And by healthcare, I mean physical and mental. It's the two are very closely tied, and including addiction and everything. There's an incredible opportunity for solutions there. We have very inefficient practices, and it is so ripe for disruption. And I feel, again, rose-colored hue, that's me. I feel like the climate is right now, and that we're so fed up that we'll be more open-minded to opportunities in healthcare. And the second one is climate. I mean, God, why are we sitting here letting the world burn around us and not investing in solutions? We can fix it. So I do think that we, as Canada, have the opportunity to, I mean, we are a leader in natural resources. Let's lead. Let's lead with that, the energy transition, and we have the capacity and the capability to do that. So in those two areas, we can show the world and participate in the solution for the entire world, not just for the Canadian economy. So let's be global thinkers in those two areas, because everybody is looking for our solutions.
Digital health, and a bonus answer, climate. Eva, over to you. Yeah. Is it fintech?
I have to say fintech, right? Like, I feel like I have to say fintech, not just because I'm in it, but I really do think there's so much opportunity, both in consumer and like enterprise financial services. It's not just that the things are so broken, there's also so much money to be made, right? Like there's both things. There's a lot of problems and a lot of money. So to me, those two things together means my vote is for fintech.
Okay. And the one sector that we are very excited about, I'm very excited about, is IoT. I think Canada punches it's early. So this is the automation of the industrial manufacturing complex. I mean, we've had a ton of automation in, we'll call it white collar service kind of a sector, but manufacturing and industrial is still a frontier that is a multi-trillion-dollar opportunity. I think Canada has all of the ingredients to punch above its weight there. We've already seen some market leaders in smart city and in ag, which have been early adopters. So I'm very excited about that.
Great answers. So some tech areas to watch there in Canada. I think that concludes our time together today. I want to thank Lisa, Eva, and Rhiannon for sharing their insights and candor with our audience. And of course, thank the Canadian Club for bringing us all together. Have a great day.
April. Thank you, April. Thank you.
A quick question for the crowd before we all go. How many people came here today reading the headlines and being a little bit pessimistic about the world and technology and the outlook for the economy? How many people feel a little different now? I don't know about you, but I'm a little jazzed. I'm a little jazzed. And about Canada, too, and the opportunities for Canada. So thank you very much for sharing your insight. It's great. Before we close, I just want to hold on to you for one more minute and tell you about some in-person events that were going to be happening. Thank you, sir, for coming back and sitting down. Don't leave yet. February 1st, the club will celebrate its 125th anniversary. That's incredible. I don't know if people really appreciate that. 125 years of the Canadian Club. That's quite a milestone. And our guests will feature former premiers from BC, Alberta, and Ontario. And on February 9th, we'll be joined by Eric Martel, the president and CEO of Bombardier. And on the 14th, Valentine's Day, we will host a panel of chief executives, including CIBC and 3M, for a discussion on Canada's immigration advantage, which I think really ties in very well with the conversation we just had around our tech opportunities. And lastly, on February 28th, we host Bernard Lord, the chair of the Canadian Life and Health Insurance Association and CEO of Medavie. Please visit canadianclub.org for more information and to purchase your tickets. We hope you can join us. And I'd just like to offer another round of applause to our event sponsors. Tories, thank you so much. All right, with that, have a great day, have a great week. Thanks so much.